Well, hello, everyone, and good morning or good afternoon if you're joining us from the East Coast. We're happy to have you here today. Our webinar topic today is SFARN, Bridging Research and Practice to Support College Students. We do have some panelists here today from both the Pell Institute and from NASPA, and we also have our very own Jeff Webster from Trellis. So come on in and we'll get started here in just a moment. And while you're coming in, if you go ahead and tell us who you are and what organization or institution you're representing in the chat, we would greatly appreciate that. I'd like to acknowledge everyone who's attending. So we have New College of Florida. Welcome, CC. I also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, so I will be sending out the webinar shortly after it's over, probably within the next, I'll say a day or two, I'll send it out to you. Okay, we have Ms. Smith from Stillman, welcome. We have Nefi here, also the University of Texas at Arlington, welcome. Western Kentucky University, we have Prairie View, welcome Ms. Pearson.
I don't think I know where Stillview is. Is that a Texas institution?
Stillman?
Stillman, yes, sorry.
No, they're actually in Alabama.
Oh.
Yes. Incarnate Ward, welcome. We have University of Houston downtown. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat. I also have the Q&A function or feature that's available if you want to do that as well. So as they're coming in, I kind of want to let you know, for those of you who may not know what SFARN is the Student Financial Aid Research Network. It is a conference that brings researchers and college practitioners who work in student aid and college access together to network, share new study results, and learn from data providers like the National Center of Education Statistics. Organized by the Pell Institute and co-sponsored by the Student Aid Rep Desk and Trellis Company, SFARN has served this community since 1985. So in this webinar, we are going to learn what to expect at the conference, how to write winning proposals, and how the experience can further your career. And I'm going to go ahead and I will introduce our panelists. First, we have Charlotte Etier. Charlotte is the Director of Research and Grants at the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, NASFA, where she contributes to research and policy needs. Prior to joining NASFA in the summer of 2014, she worked as the Dallas Martin Enrollment Policy Intern at NASFA, where she contributed to work-related policy and advocacy efforts. Charlotte began her career in higher education as a graduate assistant in the financial aid office at Central Connecticut State University and as a financial aid officer at UConn. She received a master's in student development and higher education at Central Connecticut State University and a BS in political science and women's studies from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Next, we have Terry Bond III. Terry is the Vice President of Research and Director of the Pell Institute at the Council for Opportunity in Education. His research focuses on education theory and philosophy, education policy, equitable career pathways, and career development strategy.
Teresa, we're kind of losing your audio.
Yeah, Teresa already did a great job. Vice President of Research and Director of the Pell Institute located in Washington, D.C., and trying to put this together an awesome SFARN conference.
Yeah.
And Jeff.
Yeah, so as far as me, I'm Jeff Webster, Director of Research at Trellis, and been with the organization for 36 years. And we do the Student Financial Wellness Survey, and we support 72 schools as part of Project Success. And happy to be here.
Cool. So we're talking SFARN today. So Teresa gave us a nice overview about what the SFARN conference is and some insight to who might want to attend. So to kick things off first, our first question for the group is, what was the first SFARN conference you attended and how was your experience?
Jeff, I feel like you have to go first.
Sure, sure. My first one was in 1987 in St. Louis, and the conference was on college campus of University of Washington, I believe. And it was just a really wonderful experience. Got to meet people that I still stay in touch with all these years later. Charlotte?
My first S conference was in 2014 at Indianapolis, if I have the year right, Jeff. And it was at the Lumina Foundation, like headquarters offices, which was really awesome. We got to meet a lot of great people from Lumina. The Gates Foundation attended that year because NASFA was presenting a lot of our foundation work as well. And it was great. I loved it. It was such a supportive and fun environment to present your work in and to get feedback on. And it was also a really great networking experience as well. Terry?
Yes, my first was in 2021 during COVID, the pandemic. It was online, and so I just moved out here from Chicago, and it was amazing opportunity just to learn about the financial aid field, the professionals, and it was a real combination between researchers and professionals, which was a nice mix coming from academia. So that was my first experience.
I would be curious. I bet not, but if anybody like attending the webinar has attended SFARN, I'd be curious to see in the chat like what their first conference was or may have been, or perhaps you're already registered and your first conference will be 2023. But I was wondering that as we were all introducing ourselves.
Well, yeah, I'll monitor the chat and see if the folks share. So we'll see what folks type. Let's go to the next question. Oh, someone said nope.
Oh.
Everyone here is new and they're all learning.
Perfect. I love it. Well, then you'll see this webinar in a few years and you'll be able to say 2023 in New Jersey.
Cool. All right. So now the next question is, and Jeff, maybe this is a good one you can answer. It's a little bit about the history of the SFARN conference. How did it start? What was the initial purpose? Can you give us a little insight about that?
Sure. I'm not sure on the exact date, but I think it was like 1985, 1986. And it was started by researchers at state student aid commissions. Primarily, the people who pulled it together were from Pennsylvania, California, New Jersey, Illinois, Minnesota. And they wanted to get together and they called them, early on, they called the research conference a research gang. And that's kind of how they perceived things. They wanted to get together to talk data, share notes on what they were experiencing and what they were seeing. And, they also wanted to watch some Major League Baseball. So I really think that that kind of spirit of getting together and just sort of sharing notes still prevails. I think last year when we were in Madison, there was a researcher from Iowa who said, hey, I really was looking at this transition to student aid index, and I've done some modeling, what that means, and happy to share it with anyone. And so a lot of people took them up and were able to do analyses for their state, based on what he had done. So that was kind of its origin. Over time, it grew to include a lot of academics, people who were federal higher ed researchers and student financial aid administrators, TRIO people. So it's grown, expanded. It still has people with roots in the state agencies and state perspectives, but also institutional perspectives, federal. We've always kind of looked at, the issues of financial aid, student debt, grant programs, college affordability, financial wellness. So that has always been part of it. And, historically, we try to rotate locations. East Coast, Central, West Coast. Of course, originally it was just cities with Major League Baseball, but we eventually grew out of that and experienced a lot of really cool places, like Portland, Annapolis, Madison, and now we'll be heading to New Brunswick.
I'm so glad. I must admit that I'm not a baseball fan. Try as I might over the years, that is no longer the tradition of SFARN.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh, cool. All right. So then another question. So based on the history, and Jeff, thanks for providing the wonderful context. So based on the history and purpose of the conference, who should attend and what would they gain from the experience? So maybe Charlotte, you want to go for this one?
Yeah, sure. I'll start, and Jeff, obviously, please weigh in. So, I like to say it as anyone who has an interest in financial aid should attend the conference. So one of the things I love, and Jeff mentioned this about SFARN, is that it is a conference for practitioners. It's a conference for scholars. Can be a conference for foundation program officers to attend, a great conference for graduate students who are just starting to get into the field. People who work in sort of the policy and advocacy space will also attend as well. And, I think that that's what makes it this really awesome and sort of unique experience. So what you would gain from it, I think, depends on your seat at the table, right? So as someone who works more in the policy and advocacy field, one of the things that I gain from it is really getting to have those like candid conversations with scholars. Like, hey, we're thinking about this. Are you thinking about that? Like, how could we work together on this? How could we flesh out this idea more? I would say the same thing for foundations, even the scholars, we get to sort of have those more casual, non-official conversations with the foundations that are attending, like, we're kicking around this idea. Is it something that might fall within your wheelhouse? And for the practitioners, since NASPA represents practitioners, I always tell them whenever they ask specifically what I might gain out of it, is, do you have an interest in the research? Do you have an interest in learning more about what the research is looking at, what scholars are studying? This is a great place to do so in not as maybe intimidating of an environment as some of the research conferences might have to them. I attend some of the other research conferences, and those don't necessarily feel like the place for me to try and have these sort of casual conversations and make those connections in the same way. But I think SFARN really offers that. So, maybe there's a problem or a question or something on your campus you're trying to address and solve, and you don't know where to start or who to talk to. I think, you can sit through some of the SFARN presentations, see what people are working on, maybe find someone who seems to have an interest in that topic and sort of start chatting from there. Someone in the chat asked if we do research and address education funding opportunities for military veterans. I don't remember presentations on military veterans, but Jeff maybe, or Terry maybe perhaps. I also didn't attend last year's conference. So your memory may be better than mine, but I will say, to answer the question, I think that topic would be welcome if someone obviously wanted to come and present on it. We really try, and I don't want to jump ahead too much because I think then we ask what kind of presentations people can expect, but we do really try and welcome, it's titled student financial aid for a reason. So we don't just live at the federal realm, like some groups only study federal, only study state, or only study institution. Like, I think it's really nice that SFARN runs the gamut. So I'll stop there because I think if I keep going, I'm going to hit on some of our other questions. And Jeff, I don't know if you feel like I left any who should attend. I mean, department and NCES people should also attend, but I don't think they're on this call. And I think that's a different conversation for sure.
Yeah. Just add a few things. I think the topic in the chat about military, I think that would be an excellent topic because financing for military veterans is different than a lot of other students. And I think SFARN is a place where you can talk about those kind of special situations and people get it. And, people would benefit from learning what others have produced on that topic. So, yeah, I think, for who should attend, higher ed researchers who really care about connecting with practitioners. So some other conferences, maybe just sort of academic focused, but if you really want to test your thoughts and ideas and, conclusions and, hypotheses with people who are really on the front line of trying to work with students who are struggling with these various issues, that this is a great place to get that kind of, feedback from practitioners and, practitioners who want to keep up with what the latest research is. They're practitioners for a purpose. They are serving, a population of students, and they want the best for them, and they want to know what's working out there. And so being able to listen to evaluations of new types of programs, I think would be really beneficial. I also think, what makes SFARN special is that we don't have breakout sessions. And so you basically have researchers, practitioners, all in the same room for 2 solid days. Everybody's hearing the, same presentations. That allows people to make connections from one presentation to another. And it makes for a richer interaction with the audience. So, if you just want to present and not have really good feedback, maybe that's not the place to be. I think it's a very welcoming, situation. And to echo what Charlotte was saying about, being able to talk to, people in your field, like last year at University of Wisconsin at Madison, we had an icon of student, higher education research, Lee Hansen, who is in his 90s maybe, but I'm sure, half the researchers have, featured his research in their bibliographies. There he was for 2 solid days. You can talk to him during, coffee breaks. You can, go out to dinner. I remember early in my career, I was able to talk with Gary Orfield, another icon, someone I have just incredible respect for. And here I was, basically fresh out of grad school, and he's treating me like I'm a colleague. I certainly had not earned that distinction at that point. And to just have that kind of really meaningful interaction, I think is rare in other conferences. But, at SFARN, you could end up being on the same cornhole team, during the reception, or playing higher education trivia, with someone like that. So I think that's part of what makes the experience a little richer.
Awesome. So, given all the benefits of attending the conference, and you two provided, I hope folks can see the wealth of benefits. Let's talk about the presentations people can expect. And Charlotte, you started to get into this. So, what are the typical presentation topics, and what have been some of the most memorable presentations you have experienced?
Yeah, I can start, Jeff. So, again, the conference is really designed to be anything financial aid, as we've sort of said. So it doesn't have to be a particular federal, state, institutional, and it does have a practice focus. So we do have a lot of practitioners that attend. So you do want to think about that as part of your audience whenever you are presenting. But, otherwise, I've seen sort of a large gamut of the types of presentations that we've had. We've had some very research and data heavy presentations, sharing lots of longitudinal historic data sets and going into those type of findings. Our presentations at NASFA are usually a little bit more policy research focused. So something that we're exploring at that particular time. We've presented on things like CARE funding and student outcomes. We've presented on shopping sheet feedback throughout the years. And, again, I think for the scholars, it's also just dependent on what they're working on, and what they're hoping to get feedback on will dictate kind of the topics that we get. And I mean, I think you would probably agree, Jeff, like usually the topics fall into a line with what's going on in higher ed right now, like what's happening, what feels sort of important to the field. But I do still think it's a good balance of those sort of like hot advocacy topics and just sort of more like financial aid research, like student success or looking at different populations of students. And again, I think what's really cool about SFARN is you can come and be at the beginning of your work and be looking for some feedback. Like I don't have findings yet. I'm just getting started, and I'm wondering about these questions I want to ask. Do people have thoughts on that? And it's just a really nice, like safe, welcoming environment to do that. And I personally can't think of another space that offers that, which is I feel like really nice to have for the field. So, we've had federal update panels in the past. So we'll have some colleagues from DC come in and provide federal updates. We've had NCES come in and give a NIPSAS update, which is the National Post-Secondary Student Aid Data Set, NIPSAS. I have to think through when I have to. I'm so used to saying NIPSAS. Study, thank you, or survey. Yes, there's an S, not a D. You're right, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
We've had colleagues from the department come in and share. We've had foundations come in and just sort of candidly talk about like what they're working on and what they're doing. So I know, Terry, the submission form does have like you have to pick from a bucket of the type of presentations, but other than that, I really think if any sort of structure you're looking at, from casual conversation to meaty, heavy research presentation to something in between, is sort of welcome amongst us at the conference.
Yeah. If I could add to that, I think one real cool thing about SFARN is to the extent that we have people at the state level and even some at the federal, they're often in a position where they are reporting to, government agency heads and, higher ups. Those folks are often like got some sort of hot issue or new, novel way of approaching a problem. And one of the first things they always do is turn to their research folks to find out, hey, can you look at this? Can you evaluate it? Can you see what the lay of the land is. And so in that way, attendees really get the pulse of the body politic. You get a sense early on before it hits mainstream of, hey, what are people, looking at? And so I think that's a really interesting window into the future that attendees get from the experience. And just like you said, it's really great. You're a new researcher and, you may want to know what data sources are available. And, so we often will have people from National Center for Education Statistics and other places who are there to talk about their data sets and what can be done from them, some of the caveats, some of the timing that researchers should be aware of. So when you have your ideas, you can talk to the people who are actually collecting the data, and NCS and their vendors like RTI, and that allows your research to be much more informed. And so I think that's really good experience. And as far as memorable, presentations, I remember back in the day there was a huge debate going on about student success and what was the main driver. Was it academic preparation or being able to overcome some of the college affordability hurdles? And we had really robust discussions, on that topic. And those discussions, they, kept going throughout the entire conference. You'd hear it at the coffee break. You would hear it at lunch, at the reception. People were talking about that issue in like dozens of dinner tables at restaurants at the host city. And you know, I that really, stood out because it was pretty full-throated defense of either perspective. And I think after 2 days of discussions about that you've had with various different people, I think by the end of the conference we were able to get a pretty nuanced understanding of the relative importance of academic preparation in overcoming financial hurdles.
And Charlotte, did you mention your memorable?
I didn't. I was thinking back, I think it was maybe 2018. There was some really great presentations by Laura Perna. She, I think, did a reflection on Pell indicators with Maggie. That I really liked that presentation a lot. I felt like that was super impactful. And there was also just a particular heavy amount of Pell Grant work presented at that conference too. There were a couple of other Pell Grant reports as well. And I found all of that. Again, it's in my wheelhouse, so that's obviously why it was super helpful to me. But even when something isn't in necessarily my own wheelhouse at the federal student aid level, I still find it interesting. So that's probably my most memorable one.
Yeah, I think my most memorable one was last year. Chris Hatcher and out of Florida, he did an excellent presentation looking at Florida scholarships. And what I really liked about that, my background's in theory and philosophy. And it was just really nice to see how a lot of these concepts that we're working on translate into practical spaces. So I was really, really impressed with his presentation. Even though he felt initially like, does he belong to be in this space? I think he saw that he definitely did. And it was really encouraging to see folks reach out to share their work in that way. Cool. So, and we sort of covered this a little bit already, but among the previous SFARN conference presentations, do you all think there has been a specific focus on federal, state, or institutional topics? Does it tend to lean one way, or as we've been talking about, it's just sort of anyone who has a good idea, they're just trying to get their work out?
I mean, I don't think that I think that what's happening with student aid probably dictates a little bit the way that it might lean if they're, I think I would imagine with all of the FAFSA simplification, implementation things that are coming up, we might see a little bit more at the federal level this year, but I think, it's usually a nice mix as well of the federal, state, and institutional presentations and discussions. And also, I think you would agree with this, Jeff. I feel like those of us at the federal level, like myself, we're still happy to participate in the state conversations, happy to participate in the institutional conversations. It's nice to sort of get out of our own wheelhouse a little bit, but they're also all very intertwined and they all very much work together, maybe not always in harmony, but hopefully in harmony. So even if I'm there as someone at the federal level and SHIO is presenting, which is at the state level, I often still find that a very engaging and interesting presentation that is beneficial to my own work as well. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been a healthy mix, and I think you were spot on. It kind of depends on what's going on, at that time period. I also think some of the institutional research, there's limitations as far as, how representative is it, but some of those institutional studies that researchers are presenting on are more likely to have innovative methodologies to look at different issues. And so I welcome some of that as well. I think, and then because you have the right people in the room, people can say, oh, that's an interesting approach. How can we scale that? Can we do that at a state level, at a federal level? What might be a good complement to that? How can we use that same methodology to look at different aspects of student financial, aid?
So we have the presentations, but as Jeff already mentioned, the networking, it's huge component. So much of SFARN is also about networking with fellow researchers and practitioners. Can you share your experience of an important networking encounter you had?
You want to go first, Jeff?
Sure. Yeah, I'll do that. For me, so it's been a lot of really good networking experience. I think in the early days, I had a focus on uh, uh, the student loan programs and student debt and student default and those type of issues. And at the time, Trellis was focused on Texas, and I was new to my career, but being able to go to SFARN and meet my colleagues in New York, California, New Jersey, I was able to develop relationships where, hey, if I started seeing something that looked unusual, I could just pick up the phone and, hey, Don Hills or Jenny Wu in California, are you seeing this too? Talk to Jerry Davis in Pennsylvania, Ken Red, said, I'm seeing this. Is this, a common trend or how do you look at this? And I was able to draw on the relationships that I built from that conference to really do my job and try to be as effective as possible. It's also been a real good opportunity to talk to people at NCES and their vendors to better understand the data. And that allowed me to be more effective. And it allowed me eventually to be invited to participate, be on technical review panels for their national surveys. And so then you really get into the deepness, the richness of those instruments and the trade-offs that as researchers we often have to make, and to better understand the caveats. And that has just been a real rich experience. And I'm really looking forward to the new NIPSAS coming out because I championed 2 new questions on that survey. And I'm really anxious to see what a good, robust national representative data, what the results might look like. So I think it's been a lot of really good experiences. I remember early in my career, I did a presentation and, I was presenting my master's thesis. So here I am still a graduate student, really, and I'm presenting the research that formed my thesis. And, so I was following this researcher. I think his name was Laurent Ross. Maybe some old timers might remember him. This guy was like 6'7", incredibly outgoing personality. He had asked the entire audience to stand up and sort of move their body. And, I felt like he was like getting people hugging each other. And, I think they saw people exchanging mailing addresses, so they'd be on holiday card lists. And, it was just like, and he was just really oversized personality. And I had to follow that. And I've been described in many ways, but I think oversized is not one of them. And so it was really daunting to like follow someone like that. And so as I'm up there presenting my thesis, there was a volunteer with the conference showing, how much time I had left. And it was just real clear that this person who, I really had not met was there. And she was obviously just so encouraging and, really trying to get me through what was a pretty nervous experience for a graduate student. And, her name was Marilyn Sango Jordan. She worked then with the grant programs in New York. And so I remember that so clearly to this day, that they were so welcoming. Someone like that was welcoming and made a point of introducing me to people. And to me, that was just a lot of the spirit of the conference.
Awesome. Charlotte, how about you?
Yeah, there are a few things I appreciate about networking at SFARN. I feel like I always meet someone new, which is really awesome if it's a scholar or a grad student who's working in the field. But I also feel like what's really nice is since it's usually not in DC and it gets all of those of us who work in kind of the DC policy and advocacy scene out of DC. I often find that it's a great way to strengthen my connection with colleagues I already know. So we'll try and have dinner with folks from IHAP or with folks from INCAN or Excellencia or, whoever happens to be attending that year. And, it gives us just a good chance to chat about like, what are you guys hearing? What are you guys thinking? Like, how could we tackle this? How could we work on this piece together? Which I very much appreciate. And, I think something Jess said earlier is so true. Like, just puts everyone on some really like equal footing as well. So, my very first conference, I was fresh out of grad school. I was obviously employed, but I was very new to the field. And I got to have a really cool conversation with Laura Perna, who was like superstar to me, like just so well known and has done so much work. And, it has, as Jeff mentioned in his own experience, like it felt like we were having just a very like colleague to colleague, like very equal conversation. And, I think that that's a really awesome piece that when you're at the more research focused conferences, that you don't necessarily get that. And then I think sometimes at the more practitioner focused conferences, because you don't get the researchers quite as heavily there as well. So, I think it always strikes that nice balance for me. And then it kind of helps you, like, I'll see a presentation that is maybe state focused and I'm wondering like, hey, how could we scale that? And I'll try and reach out to that person and say like, do you want to chat during the next coffee break? Like, this is really interesting to me. Like, I think this could be really impactful for NASFA's work. Like, can we talk more about this? And the foundation is here. Like, let's bring in a foundation person and have this conversation. And, you heard that this grad student is also looking at this. Like, it's really like nice and fun to kind of string together those conversations that when you're trying to do it via Zoom or via virtual location don't happen as organically as they probably do whenever you're able to be in person.
I love it. I think you're absolutely right. So I think now we're going to move a bit into some of the logistics. So if folks have questions, as Teresa's pointing out, feel free to put in chat. But I want to also thank Jeff and Charlotte for sharing their experiences and insight. So this is wonderful. So move the slide over. There we go. All right. So given all this great info about the conference, some folks now might be wondering how to submit a proposal to present or other logistical questions. So let me know if you have some questions in the chat box, but I'm gonna provide some basic information. So when is the next conference? The 40th SFARN conference will be at Rutgers University in New Brunswick on July 13th and 14th. It will be in person. So the benefits of networking with people in person, right? Not just online. And no online sessions there will be no sessions recorded for online, because this is really a chance for folks to try ideas, to share their work, and to be human. So July 13th, 14th, Rutgers University, New Brunswick. How do you submit a proposal to present? So you have to complete an online application. That deadline has been extended to February 24th, which I believe is next Friday. I'm going to put the link in the chat box real quick. Cool. So if you're interested in presenting, sharing some work, feel free to complete that form. And then notifications of acceptance will be sent, I believe we have set for March 15th. So it's a fairly quick, good turnaround. We have a nice process to get through it. But in the meantime, if you have any additional questions, of course, just feel free to email me or Jeff or Charlotte, and we're more than happy to provide some answers. Another question folks might have is, when will general registration be open for those who simply just want to attend and network? So maybe you don't want to present, maybe you just want to get the vibe, you just want to network, you just want to learn some ideas. So I think we're opening around March 27th is sort of our tentative date. There is a cost to attend per individual. It's $300, but this includes breakfast, lunch for both days of the conference. In addition, access to a reception that we usually do. I think we should do the first day, correct, Jeff? It's like the first day of the day before. So you comes to reception. We usually have drinks, food, and games. So that's what the $300 gets you. We try to make it very affordable. Our goal is to beat inflation, right? There also is a discount for students. So if you have undergrads or graduate students, it's only $100. So we strongly encourage students to participate because they are the future of this field. So and they provide some valuable insights in terms of research and practice. So $100 for students is the discounts. So beyond these basic logistical questions, now we'll take any additional questions from the audience for some Q&A. So as I mentioned, if you have a question, let's check the chat box. Let's see. So is there any research to address how CARES Act or any COVID funding has affected students? So we're gonna, we can get back to you. I think that's, we'll answer that. You can email us. Me, Jeff, Charlotte are happy to do some research, provide some information. If any folks have any additional questions about the logistics, of course, feel free, or in the conference in general, let me know.
Yeah. And just one other thing about the CARES.
Yeah,
we had a question on that, and in our recently published report on student financial wellness, we cover the prevalence of that. So yeah, it was a really high percentage of students who received some sort of stimulus funding.
well, I don't think I see. Go ahead.
Maybe we should talk a little bit about like what makes a good presentation.
Yeah, I can, with Charlotte, Jeff, you want to go? I can take a stab. I have a basic idea of what makes a good presentation. So
Yeah, go, Terry.
Yeah. So my thing is passion. I know that's basic, but it's really important that when whatever you are trying to present, like this is a safe space. But if you bring passion, it's okay if you're wrong. It's okay if you make a mistake, or it's okay if you don't understand something, or it's okay if you know a lot about your topic and you really want to just share all that information. So when I think about a great proposal, I look for, is this person really passionate about the topic? Are they doing a study that I can see relates to their field that they're working in? Those type of things go through my mind. Of course, we have the forum that help us think through how to articulate that passion, but that's what pops up for me.
Charlotte, can you speak a little bit maybe about some of the criteria that the proposals are evaluated on? Like there's relevancy, excuse me. I think good presentations are, it's a research conference, so you have to talk about your data source.
Yeah.
But also it's how relevant your topic is to the field and kind of the scope and, interesting approaches. I think those all make for good ones. And even like really effective ways of presenting quantitative information, that can be a real challenge. And I remember in, some good presentations from like Ed Trust, and even way back when Porfirio Diaz from Arizona had some really good ways of showing demographic change over time. So those are some of the things I look for. How about you, Charlotte?
Yeah, and we also we have sort of the usability of the topic. So while I don't think it's a required field, but if there is some, usability, like can practitioners take your work back and apply it to their own work immediately? If not, that's okay. But if they can, then we like to know that. We have that as a field. Or researchers, can they take this back and apply it to their work? I think that probably falls mostly for like our NCS presentations and things like that, but probably some other scholarly presentations too. And again, it's like that relevancy to practitioners piece. So, is your work focusing on the needs of practitioners? And I think we would be surprised. Almost every body of work on student aid does focus on the need of practitioners. Sometimes you just need help getting there. if you're not someone who is focused in the practice of student financial aid before. So I know that's something Jeff and I have helped submitters with before. Like, I don't think that this is relevant to practitioners. Can you help me? I still want to present at this conference. And, you know, given the two different seats that we sit out on the table, I think we have a pretty good idea on that piece. And I really agree with Terry, like the passion that you bring for your topic. I mean, I've seen some presentations on the agenda before that I'm like, I'm not sure I know anything about this topic, or I'm not sure how to like draw it back into my own work, but the presenter is very like excited about it. They're very into it. I think we all choose research topics because they are things that interest us. And I think that that can be really drawing in to the audience, which is really nice since it is a more like intimate setting. So those are some of the other pieces that, you know, and I do think we're all happy to help, you know, with any questions. Terry's your first line of contact with that. And then, you know, on the chance that he can't help you make the connection, then he can always connect you with Jeff and I as well.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to thank everyone for joining for today's webinar about the SFARN conference. Again, if you have any questions about the upcoming conference, it's in July, beautiful July. Whether it's presenter or general attendee, please feel free to contact us. And we are happy to respond. But we do look forward to seeing you all in the summer if you can make it. In the meantime, have a wonderful and great day.
Yes, and I'd also like to say thank you. This, like, as I stated earlier, the webinar has been recorded, and there is a little short survey after this webinar. So if you could just take time just to complete it, I think it's only about 4 or 5 questions. We truly would appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time, and have a marvelous day. Thank you, panelists.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.